Now, let me ask you a question. What if you could take a crucial piece of infrastructure costing your organization $50,000 a month and reduce that cost to $150 a month? No, your hearing isn't wrong. That is a 99.7% cost reduction. It sounds impossible, right? But our guest today did exactly that. Today, we're not just talking about theory, we're deconstructing the exact blueprints that he has used, from the core architectural decisions to the winning mindset, so that you can apply the exact same principles within your organization. This one is one that you are going to want to save. G'day, welcome back to the Enterprise Tech Playbook, where we are on a mission to empower every IT professional with actionable wisdom and a collaborative community making their next stride in enterprise tech, one that truly leads with impact. Our guest today is T Hoque. T is a senior leader with a wealth of experience within the enterprise tech space. He's a seasoned leader who has been in the industry since 2003. Working his way up from system engineering roles into senior leadership across public and the private sectors. And that deep experience has given him an incredible perspective on what it truly takes to make technology mature and effective within an organization. And today, he's here to share that blueprint from some of his most impactful achievements. T, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. It's an honor.
It's absolutely an honor for me to have you here sharing all of your insights and wisdoms with everyone listening today. Within your pre-interview notes that you shared with us, there was one really powerful guiding philosophy, and that is you look after your team and the team looks after your customer and the stakeholder. Now, in a world often driven by metrics and shiny new tech, why is the people first approach the absolute cornerstone of your playbook?
Let's take a step back. A tech will never have its own mindset of how to be used in a solution or in a problem-solving state. However you want to use the tech, pick an example. Say the security lake is a new tech which is just established itself into the AWS planet right now, which looks after and takes care of the centralized logging solution. If you really want to use it to a problem-solving state for a particular organization, a company, program, or an application, if you really have to use it, you have to have people. You have to have people with two things. One, the work needs to be interesting for them, and B, it needs to work for the organization. And if you combine those two, the third thing as a leader you have to give to the people is fail-safe environment. Once you combine those three, the people will grow, they have a meaningful work, and they will love the challenges, and they will conquer the planet for you, pretty much. And that's how you look after them, and you influence them into the right direction. When I say right direction, that means you nurture them as people, as their talent. Everyone has a talent, one way or the other. People has brains to functions, things to learn. They're like a sponge. And once you start navigating around them and find out the core strength of the people that you're working with, you can do absolutely anything.
So AI is not going to completely replace everyone? Is that what you're saying? That we still have to actually learn to be leaders?
Yes, it actually does. And take it from the person who have done an AI major back in 2002. Back then, there was no field for AI. Now AI is becoming a thing. I'll put a simple example to this. It will come up with a story and actually say it, because everyone knows these days cars are having automatic driving system and AI-based driven system, and they look at images and go, yeah, this is how I'm going to navigate this machine. Two examples. The first one, with the cars, is when it drives, it cannot distinguish between a dummy and a human person. That's
Oh,
AI for you.
really? I didn't know that.
The first version of Tesla's self-driven thing went through underneath those 18 wheelers because it saw a gap in its camera. It doesn't show underneath of an 18
Oh,
wheeler
okay.
truck. So that
Yep.
gap was a complete, yes, I can drive this car, no problem. But if it's a human, it will stop. Second thing is start peeling up the onion of AI. AI is a large
Mhm.
language model which learns with all the information that is being provided to it. It keeps on learning at the
Yep.
back end based on this model. That's based on an algorithm. That's your learning model. Take another step inside of the algorithm. It's basically binary logic. Take another step
Mhm.
back, another step in. You'll go, it only can understand 0 and 1. Between you and I, and let's say there's a room full of people. There's different people in there, in that room, different ages and different countries, colors, everything you can think of.
Yep.
If there's a catastrophe in that room, let's say everyone will die in the
Mhm.
next 10 seconds, what would our brain think? How would we behave? And how would an AI behave? We will behave in such a way that we will first think of the kids because the different ages, kids and the oldest, we'll just take them out. However, our brain thinks, we'll push them out, we'll let them go, we'll try to save them. But if we go back to the AI model, they will see what are the chances? Who will survive in an actual scenario? Take the extreme
Yeah.
scenario. I know it's
Yeah. Yeah.
it
The 1 and 0. It's
so
black and white.
it,
Yeah.
it pretty much
Yeah.
calculate everyone's survival percentage and go, all right, Matt might be the only one who can be saved with, let's say, 10% of survival rate. Everyone else will die eventually. Let's just
Yeah.
take out Matt. That's the difference. And we can never replace a human with AI. Yes, we will be able to replace some of the functions, some of the things we do, some of the repetitive tasks we do, some of the basic
Yeah.
stuff we do, but the instinct can never be replaceable by an AI. It will never have
Mhm.
human instincts. All those movies that we see with the scary thing that AI will take over and it will have singularity and all that, that's Young's way. Just not possible with the technology that we have. We cannot do it at this point in time and may not be able to do it in such a length of time that we'll be alive. But I'm not saying it's impossible to achieve it. It's just not possible at the current time and technology that we have.
Yeah, and I think that really lots of people are more focused on Tron's the how is Howls was it? Is
Yeah.
that the other one? There's been a fair few different ones, and they go, oh well, this is the potential, and I agree, it is a potential,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
but lots of people do fail to realize is that AI has been here for a very long time. I think it was 60s, wasn't it? Early 60s or something like that. Someone will fact check me, I'm sure, but it's been around for a very long time. Generative AI has been, that's a bit more of a
It's a big.
newer, yeah, that's a newer thing. But AI has been here for a very long time, and it has been used extensively for a very long time. And that actually brings on to another one of your core philosophies as we talk about AI. Now, you're saying here is work smarter, not harder. Now, many people say this, and for me, I say work smarter so that you can work harder in other areas. But many people say this, but very few actually even darn well do this thing, right?
Yeah.
So, what does that phrase actually really mean,
Mhm.
but particularly within the IT landscape?
Yeah. I'll explain the whole scenario a bit more so it gets cleared. And it's funny when you take a step back and really jump on it. Let's take a building in an organization. There are many different people, from the CEO to, let's say, the security guard. There are different layers of people into different occupations that there is in that building supporting that organization. If I phrase the question, who is the hardest working person in that building? Who's the person who lives and works in that building for the longest hour? What would be the answer?
Security.
Why don't we pay them the maximum salary then?
Societal norms is probably the first thing that comes into my head.
Yeah, because if you look into the CEO's point of view versus the security guard, see, the security guard is working longer hours, possibly the hardest, is looking at every single thing in that building. The CEO is sitting on the top, making the decision. There's two sides of this coin. Technically speaking, the CEO is taking more of the responsibility, making the right decision for the organization, which takes possibly the shortest time, but based on the data and the framework that is available to him. But the hardest working person is the security guard who works in there the longest time. That's not the value. Working smarter, not harder, is you need to do the work which is value driven. You will see
Yeah,
people
okay.
in your organization, they're doing the same thing repeatedly over and over, and they're good at it. It's not that they're bad at it. It's they're
Hmm.
accustomed to it. They don't adapt the change to do something better, do something which is not repetitive, which is not something chaining themselves to their desk. But if you start thinking, why am I doing this? A machine can do it, or I can throw some automation to it these day and age and use some technology to get this done. I might try this new thing, and this seems to be a new challenge. Yes, it may ask you, or that pathway or that thought process may take you to something different, but it can be the mainstream work for the organization or thing that will give you the value. I'll put an example out here. There was a time in my career where I used to do releases for a insurance organization. I used to take care of their whole insurance platform and used to do releases after releases. Now, after I think from 6 months, just keep doing the releases. And back then, the releases used to take a whole 24-hour shift. And I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And it's just the code that is getting different, and that's just getting in. I still remember the day. I think it was around 2-ish in the morning, either 2 or 3:30 when the testing was starting. And I stand up in between in a room where everyone was there. And I was, all of you know, and it used to be a very friendly, teamy environment, have jokes around and go and ask, say things to each other. And I used to have a car that I used to run around in when the test used to go around, because I don't have anything unless the test comes back and say, okay, this doesn't work, then we have to jump through the rollback scenario. I
Yep.
stand up and in the room, I think there was about 6 or 7 people in there. And I'm going, so you all know we are all gonna get old. And we are getting old. There's no denial of that one. They were like, yep. And I pretty much, the next question changed my life pretty much from day dot on that point forward. And I'm going, do you guys see yourself doing this forever? We've been doing this for a big chunk of our time when we grow and mature. And then for the 6 months, we are all together every Thursday or every fortnightly Thursday night or every month Thursday night. We're doing this. How long do you see
Mm.
yourselves doing this? And they pretty much just looked at me with awesome face, like, what are we doing there? And I actually said to them, let's start automating this thing. And technically speaking, in 6 months or so, or possibly in a year, this whole thing can be scheduled. We don't have to do anything, nothing.
Yeah,
So,
okay. Yep.
and we had DBAs, we had mid-range team, we had, I think there was a few network guys as well in there. They were like, okay, so what do you have in mind? What is the first thing that we are doing the same repeat thing over and over again? The DBA pretty much just put his hand up and go, you know what? I can automate the whole thing and I don't need to be here. I can actually have a sleep and snooze and you guys can have run it. And I'm, all right. So what you can do? And he was, give me 3 months. Yeah, no, actually he said, give me a month and I'll automate this piece and then we'll add that to a plan. And the mid-range guy came back and say, I'll have something for you, which would do all the deployment, all the releases in and putting the app files into different things. And then I was like, cool. All right, you get onto database thing. I don't want to see you from next month. And mid-range guy, you come back with what we can do, and then we can start testing. And I'll make sure
Mhm.
that this team comes and do the release for the next 6 months while we are testing these sort of things at the back end, going through all the
Yeah.
dev
Okay.
test, the life cycle. Started with that. And I think jumping back into the timeline, and within 3 months, I think my team leader came back to me and say, why don't you just automate the damn thing? And give me 2 more weeks. I don't need 6 months or a year because we're already ahead of the timeline. Then all these things are getting automated. So the database is automated. The DB has gone off and he's going, I'm going to take a snooze after every release and I'm not going to come online. And cool. If there's a problem, I'll call you up. If not, sleep. Don't do anything.
Yep. Yep.
Long story short, when we left that role, the entire thing was completely automated. No one was there within 3 months, and no one was physically present in that release function. That was about 6 or 7 people every night, every Thursday night for doing 24-hour shift. We weren't there.
Yeah.
At the end, it became very boring for me because I was scheduling it, watching the schedule run and do everything. And I
Mhm.
wanted to get out of that role then. And I'm like, I don't need to be here. Even the release plan was automated. So there was a few way of doing the releases. You either do make a big massive change or like there's a feature release, you just select the release and it generates the plan, sends it out to the every stakeholder that it needs to go through as a comms plan and everything that happens fully automated. And I'm like, this is
Yep.
becoming very, very, very boring. And I pretty much said to my team leader, I wanted to do something else. And they were, no, you can't. You need to be in production. And I'm not doing production anymore. Don't care. I'll walk. I pretty much walked out of it.
Oh, really?
You automate yourself technically, and then you can do something else. And
Yeah.
the lesson in there is you can automate to the area, and you can do it at an extent where you can do something else. But as a leader, so whoever my leader was, they really need to think and see the growth in there and go, we can utilize this whole team into something else, which they didn't thought
Mhm.
of back at that time. But I do in my leadership. If we're automating things, we need to do different things because the challenges needs to come through like a conveyor belt into a production system. Because if not, the team who are doing the most valuable work for the organization, saving them time, effort, and money. Just think about it. 7 people, 24-hour shift, twice a month. That's the pressure for the team. They're burning themselves out. That is no longer
Yeah.
required. So
Yep.
you need to shift that thing. As a leader, you need to start new things. You need to start going into different areas, different things, different calendars. If you don't do that, those sort of things gets lost. Funny enough,
Mm.
one of my teammates, think about last year or so, send me a picture, the email that used to get generated as part of the database refresh. So database needs to refresh before the new database
Yep.
structure gets in and all that.
Mhm. Yep.
He shot a screenshot at me going, you're still in the system. It has my picture and the headshot. And I'm like, you guys haven't moved that thing and do anything else. That thing still runs. The workflow still runs. It's a fully automated. So it is basically the confirmation that the database is refreshed, which is automated. And funny enough, the
Yeah.
DBA put my name and my email address and my picture in the headshot of that notification. It's still there.
Yeah. Perfect. That's really good.
Mm.
Well, it's a really good example that actually leads into one of your other things that you said. And that was the KISS principle. I mean, we've all heard of the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. Although I think that that's been changed lately, depending on the audience. But I'm going to say keep it simple, stupid, because that's the way I know it as. And you noted that the moment you pivot from the KISS, the overhead will always drag you down. So was that automation piece that you were just talking about, is that a good example, or is there another example that really stands out to you as a aha moment of why the principle is so important?
I'll come to you. That was part of it because in that 7 people or 6 people that we work with, we name ourselves as a specialized team of doing this at the background without anyone's blessings or anything. But the moment the whole thing was successful, there was a team who wanted to formalize the thing because the things were done in such a simple manner that if it fails, it will send you an automated notification that I failed, reason, blah. So you got all the information. Then they were starting to put through, no, this needs to be a planned PI session with all the things that you're actually going to collect over the failures. And if not, we have to do this. So the things in the most simplistic way started to get under a whole bunch of organizational, how should I best put this? Which wasn't necessary,
Yeah.
but you can jump into the agile or the ITIL framework, but some of the scenarios in there may not be the best way of doing it. You can have all the formulation and things, but some of the things are better to in its raw form to get the best out. They started, what do you call it? The regular improvement that they can do, and it is already in its best state and the shortest workflow. They go, no, we have to put the testing things in there and make sure everyone's notified and the comms plan is right there. They'll, no, we just need to put it out more holistic comms plan, and the template in the comms plan needs to be blah, and no one really needs to see an extensive comm with banners and things, and you're just complicating
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
slows the whole thing down, which is not necessary. Let me put it this way, which would actually covers the whole scenario. If you take a Formula One car versus your normal everyday, I wouldn't say everyday, I would say, let's say a proper sports car, let's say a proper BMW M5 for argument's sake.
Okay.
If you
Yep.
take those
That's not
two,
where my mind was going. I'm a big fan of American muscle cars, so I was going
let's
like
say,
a Dodge
yeah,
Challenger.
let's pick the Dodge Challenger or Charger, whichever one you pick. Let's
Yeah,
go.
Challenger cat,
Okay.
wide body.
Yeah, let's say a wide body Hellcat Challenger. Yes, it can go with its Hellcat if you go into the for argument's sake. But the difference between the two cars is if you go into the muscle car, each will have a heavyweight body. It will have all the tires, all the gears. It actually changes its weight to a massive. So a Hellcat will weigh around somewhere between 2 tons to 2.5 tons, something like that. But if you take the weight of a Formula One car, that would be less than a ton or close to a ton, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If both of the car has the same power from their engine, power to weight ratio, which one will move faster?
F1, of course. Yeah.
Same principle goes to your working and workflow. The more administrative and governance, the more things you put on top of your workflows, it's just
Yeah,
going
that
to
makes
drag you
sense.
down.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
That's the
Okay.
simplest analogy I can do.
That's actually a really good analogy. I love it.
So,
All right. Let's shift gears a little bit. So it gives us a really good idea about who is T. Let's shift into the blueprint, the focus of today's session. So you were involved in re-architecting Queensland Ambulance's system, taking it from the $50,000 a month down to $150 a month. Can you paint us a picture of that? And what was the situation when you first encountered it? And what were the core, not just technical challenges, but was there any business challenges or enterprise change management? Not IT change management. We'll leave that there because that will take too long. But what was the situation? Paint us that for us,
yeah,
and what?
sure. The best way to put it, I'm going to keep on that weight analogy.
Yeah, love it.
It's better in that way. Let's keep the Formula One car aside in the corner, and let's take the Dodge Challenger, and let's make it from a Dodge Challenger to a truck.
Okay.
So if you take a truck, the more weight you put onto the truck as a like 18-wheeler lorry or like a big weight, or you're transporting something, which was the data that comes in to the system and then gets processed at the back end and then goes process data to its different places. Then there's the log, there's the system, and then there's this replication that needs to happen at the background. So the data used to go to the databases in-house and then live in cloud platforms as well.
Okay.
Doing those things added more weight to the system, and it was a big, massive. So I still remember they have a main database and 3 replication database to support the replicated data for everyone who is connecting to the system, which was majority of the cost. But somehow you have to lean that back. And people who understands databases, there's 3 ways to actually bring a database to its perfect condition.
Mhm.
Your data set needs to be very simple and very logically connected between your columns and things, and it has to be indexed properly. If it's not,
Mhm.
then it will slow your database reading time. The
Yep.
second part is your database needs to be very clean. When I say clean, the dead tuples, the extra spaces, and all the other things, it needs to be very lean from that aspect.
Mhm.
And the third one is your compute on the database needs to be perfect in terms of your compute and your memory. So it can be into the memory and then it can dissect, run all the queries and give you. But having said that, the technology needs to be right as well. So if you compare your, let's say, an on-prem SQL database, which has a very limited compute and power and memory, versus if you take it into cloud, then you can change your instances and dynamically bring it up and down and then adjust your database accordingly. So the framework we start taking to optimize this, or let's say this big truck to bring it into an F1 car sort of a scenario, is how we can best manage it to start with. What are the problems on the data set? So we start discovering the data set to start with. Everyone targets
Yep.
the application, but underlying thing lives in the data because the application is constantly talking to the database, running all the queries, bringing the data, pushing in data in. So it's the read and write tech. And it has to be optimized in such a way that the database is performing to its best.
Mhm.
So I have a DBA and I asked him to come on board and start having a look. So he came on board and started improvising the efficiency of the data set, the indexes, the database performing. And we went through a few phases and then it became optimized. And I'm going, looking at the whole thing and its stats and its performance, just going, the technology is now needs to be something else. And to make sure it performs at its best. And we also need to have reliability, and the data needs to be in such a manner that it scales up and down to give its best out. And the whole platform was lifted into AWS back then. And Aurora came back. Aurora actually was established back in that time. And I was looking and
Yeah.
reading in it
Okay.
and going, the way Aurora functions, it's quite funny. If you go down to the core basic, it come back with HA automatic in the storage. I don't have to worry about
Mhm.
it. Great.
Yep.
And then looking at the read and the write nodes, the way it distributes its read and write node capability via its load balancing capacity, it is funny.
Mhm.
You can have your read nodes completely scalable. If your demand is now, it's 100%, it will grow to the maximum as cluster, and then it will start shrinking back. It will have
Yeah.
one master node, which will do all the writings. And let's say for argument's sake, even if you have a write node failure, one of the read nodes automatically will become the write node and start writing. So there's no gap in
Yep.
between. It's a bulletproof technology. Now, and I was pushing multiple meetings with my directors, my CEOs, and going, we need to change the tech. We need to redesign the application and change the tech to make sure we are incorporating Aurora. And that will bring out this whole system into a very profitable and sort of in a way that we don't have to touch it. Because every time we touch, it's a cost for the organization.
Mhm.
And let's not go into the details of the meeting. Let's just keep it. And there's multiple conversations, and
Yeah.
they thrown at me going, "You picking up the challenge?" And yeah, sure, no problem. In doing so, we also had a look into the queries that are coming into the databases and make sure the queries are optimized as well. So
Hmm.
that was the thing that was the database team, well, my DBA or the DBA team, and the application team was optimizing at the back end. Once this is all done, we started migrating ourselves into Aurora. That was
Yeah.
the
Okay.
big massive change for the tech, and doing all sorts of testing. And we had done it live. Then there's a reason why I'm saying it live. DMS, or the database migration service, came out back then, and we were told by AWS that you cannot use this as a replication tool. And
Really?
and back then we actually have a replication tool as a continuous replication tool. Sorry, not as a continuous replication tool. You can't use it. That's not the use case.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
by then, I have all my systems engineer came up to their certified AWS solution state. And I pretty much locked them up in a room with myself going, next 30 minutes, no one's getting out. Give me one good reason why we can't use this. Because I had a read of the whole thing, and I had all my certifications as well. So I've gone through with them being a certified thing. Every one of us looked at each other going, I don't see a reason why we can't. So we bend the
Hmm.
rules. We went like, okay, this needs to be a continuous replication to the new database, and the system can run. We are not stopping the system. So it's going to be a seamless transition on the back end going into Aurora. Then we changed the front end. So we
Yep.
migrated the whole database live into Aurora using DMS and kept on running it for almost a month to make sure
Mhm.
everything is up and running. Then we repoint the front end to the back end, the new back end, and go, let's jump into Aurora. And it literally brought down all the replications. So I still remember, it used to be an R4 8x large database, four of them running continuously with full capacity. With Aurora, we started with T3 mediums. It
Yeah.
still had
Okay.
capacity.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, because Aurora, not many of the people know, Aurora is a very optimized database in structure.
Yeah.
Everyone just go, I want to have my SQL server in this hosted VM form. You're wasting your time, effort, money, all of it together.
Yeah. Just go serverless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because at
Yeah.
night, you're not using that capacity, but you're paying for it. But if you go into Aurora with and our motto was, we will try to bring it down in a service layer model. There's a new service comes in, it will go into a separate tiny VM. We were targeting about T3 micros and T3 mediums at best.
Okay.
That new service goes into a T3 micro instance on a separate node that comes into the database, feeding all the information. When you
Yeah.
go
Right.
into a microservice architecture with a database that performance sitting at the back end with all the things that are completely optimized, then you have a system that reduces cost. Because the problem is
Mm.
people will always go, I want to go into container, I want to containerize everything, but you're not getting one fact. If you have problems in your system, you're technically multiplying your problems because as the container grows back and forth, your problem goes back and forth. That's what
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
ideally, if I talk about blueprint, first it's to understand your application to the core. Then you optimize yourself. There's an optimization part that everyone misses and go, I'll put everything into the container and run it. So you're technically multiplying your problem right here. Then you build up your system in such a way that you can separate them in different services. Because when you actually go into different microservices architecture, you bring your instance cost down. And the next phase everyone will love is the serverless model. So half
Mhm.
of the things, once you jump into at that optimized level, I was pushing for serverless because if we do serverless, then that $150 could even be a $50 model, which no one agreed with me.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it. brings up a really good point though, because you mentioned in one of your other comments that you made in the pre-interview notes there is that knowing what the problem is only 50% of your battle. And we've sort of discussed a couple of those things beyond just the that massive staggering cost difference though. What do you think though was the actual real underlying problem here in that situation? Do you think that it was just simply poor architectural decisions, or was it that there was new technology that helped solve a problem? What do you think was the core underlying?
Big thing.
Yep.
First problem that we encountered is this configuration that there was.
Okay.
So when I say database configuration, that's more on the design of the database, where your data or the relational model is linked to each other, plus the indexing. That was a problem. So we fixed that one. The second problem was if you have a database which is designed in such a way that is manual in terms of you have one master and three slaves and your slaves are read only, there's a lag between the two. So once you write it, it doesn't get immediately available into the write unless they're part of the same cluster. And
Mhm.
if you have a VM sort of mindset in there, that lag gets even higher. If you're for some reason your replication goes to a different zone in AWS, there's a lag between somewhere of 10 milliseconds to 44 milliseconds. That's the maximum lag that can happen. Whereas
Yep.
in Aurora, there's layers and layers of replication that happens within the same storage system. So the storage talk to each other. So the replication lag is practically 0.001 from memory. The data
Okay.
is technically immediately available. So the second part is technology on a problem solving manner. That was
Mhm.
the core of the issue. Then the
Yep.
third one is your application queries that are coming into the database. If your query is not optimized, then you lose effort. You will lose actually the time of the compute. What I mean by that is everyone goes to the developer team going, dev team, do everything, the true DevOps. But here's the fun thing. A developer is not a genius in database. However, his query is coming into the database and performing in there without a DBA. You don't know the fact that your query is coming to the database and not optimizing it and running at its best that it can run. You still need the DBAs to have those queries optimized. If you don't do it, this part doesn't matter what you throw at it, will perform at its lowest performance scale it can possibly
Yep.
run. So that
Yeah.
was the
Okay.
third problem we actually saw and go. Initially, database itself, it's a black box for everyone. Developers write whatever queries they want and pass it on to the database going, this system is slow. Let's throw more hardware at it. It's not about hardware. It's about the code you write, the efficiency of the code, which most of the people, most of the DevOps team, most of the DevOps person even go, it's the hardware. We just need more hardware into it. No, it's not. You need to look into your own problem and find out and measure what you're writing is the best one. Let us
Mhm.
play. If you use a left join to a table or on a query, you reduce your performance by 50%. It's practical experience. Ask any DBAs. They will
Okay.
go, do not use left join, use an index, and then search on the index data and query on it. Those are the
Okay.
differences, or those are the difference maker. And then there's the raw problem. If you're not coming from a technological background or being a techie, then jump into a leadership role. Trust me, it is really hard to understand if you're just a people's leader.
Mhm.
You will
Yeah.
not see the value in understanding that and go, let's change that fact, let's change that query. You'll always throw more hardware at it and go, it's just run out of capacity. We'll just throw more hardware at it. 90% of the time, that is not the case.
No. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you probably could throw more hardware at it, and you're
That's
going to
just going to add
continue to
more
do
cost
it,
of it.
and so yeah,
It
it
literally,
continue to
so
add more costs.
hardware equals
Yeah.
money. So you're throwing money at it. when it's not
Mhm.
required. You just need to look into the query, need to look into the architecture, need to look into how the query performs inside of that database or inside of the application. Once you
Yep.
understand those, you can bring down the cost so much. It is in a different level.
Yeah. Okay. We spoke about the KISS principle a little bit earlier.
Mhm.
Was there a project where the KISS principle absolutely paid dividends from an architectural layer?
Mhm. Well, you can take the Queensland ambulance for argument's sake. We haven't really changed any of the architecture, but we optimized the architecture.
Okay.
I'll explain that a bit so it's clear. The core principles of the architectural designs in the way it queries the data and the way the data is stored into the database and the way given the output, that hasn't changed at all. The only
Mhm.
thing that has changed is basically the query that comes from the applications goes into the database. That is the only thing from an architectural principle perspective that has changed. Every query
Okay.
has been optimized. Every query pretty much has gone through its optimized state every month for a 3 month exercise. Every morning, we used to come and look into the top running queries, which is taking the most of the resources. And then we go, let's take the top three, optimize them to a better state. How much more we can actually get out of query optimization, 30%,
Yeah.
50%.
Okay. Yep.
So
Hmm.
that is principally what has been done in optimizing it in such a state that every single transaction is super fast. It's not like, oh, we send this to the database and we're waiting for a response and the response takes, let's say, 10 seconds. It's not. It returns in milliseconds, like fraction of a millisecond. That's how fast it used to be. I don't know what are the state it is in right now, but when I left, that was how it was.
Yeah. Okay. Well, moving away from, I guess, talking about architecture, and if we can talk about tooling for a little moment.
Mhm.
One of the other things that you had put down here is that you get married to the business workflows, don't get married to your tools. In a project like this, can you give us examples about some really specific tool choices that were made and explain why it was the perfect fit for the business workflow that you were serving and not just a popular choice? And it could be that particular example, or it could be another example, or maybe just a general philosophy.
I'll use the same example, so it would be easier for everyone to correlate. So the PostgreSQL database in its master slave configuration, that was the initial configuration onto the Queensland Ambulance
Yep.
database.
Okay.
Aurora runs with PostgreSQL as well. It's just the design architecture that is different of the core database versus the in the data model and things. They're practically the same. It makes a difference if you choose the right tool for the right job. We need scalability for that layer of demand that comes in the morning, then goes off at night. Why would you want to waste your money? Because eventually, the way cloud works is it takes away your capex cost. It actually runs
Hmm.
an OpEx. If you want to
Yep.
shrink your OpEx cost, it needs to shrink back as well for the database or the core of your application. It needs to shrink back overnight and then expand when the demand is there. That's why you gain the maximum efficiency. In doing so, if you have the wrong technology, let's say the master slave of the Postgres database, which is huge in size and it's constantly running, do you think that is the maximum efficiency of the money you're throwing at it as an operational customer at the end of the month? It is not. So you need to use, and as I said, don't get wedded to the don't get wedded to the tool, but get wedded to the workflow, because your workflow or the business need will always run in a streamline. And if you can see there's less of a handoff, then that is an optimization in your business workflow. And you can choose any tool to do that. your tools evolve. Let's say Aurora came out at that time and we use Aurora to gain this efficiency. Then Aurora serverless came and popped up, which is even better. And if we can have the workflow in a very optimized way, we can jump into the serverless and save more cost.
Yeah. Okay.
It,
Yeah.
it's the same way because the tools is an paradigm that keeps on changing, keeps on evolving. Let's say 10, 12 years back, semantic product was awesome. Everyone was just for protection. That was the thing.
Yeah.
Now, you want to run away from them jumping into a different tool. But if your protection working model is as optimizing as you can think of, you can bounce
Hmm.
between different tools. Whatever the tools are evolving, you can actually ride on the wave to have the best tool for your team, for your organization. But if you're wedded to the tool, you will still live in that paradigm where the whole world is evolved to a completely different paradigm.
Yeah. And it also leads to a situation where you start to, I guess, have blindness to their downfalls. I'm thinking of a very particular CDN tool in my mind that the support is absolutely woeful, but people still love
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
There are many examples of it. Think of Nokia as a phone. There was a time when it run the planet, pretty much.
Mm.
But their ability to not evolve, their workflow was the best, no doubt, because that's how they were in there. But their ability to make wedded to that tool, wedded to that OS was the downfall. They can still have the same workflow. If they're not wedded to the tool or the OS, they could still be like running like a king in the mobile world right now. You never know
Yeah.
what could
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. Well, that's very true. Talking about continual improvement,
Mm.
it goes into really well for my next question. And blueprints aren't, when we talk about blueprints, this isn't just about diagrams or architectural patterns or those types of things. It's also clearly a process. In the pre interview, you'd sort of slightly mention it here as well, a little bit about doing agile and DevOps, but doing it in the right way. So when we look at things and take off what you've already said, not overburdening things with frameworks and structures and keeping it simple, how did the CI/CD pipeline, or how has a CI/CD pipeline and automated testing and the infrastructure around that, how have you seen that really support the business goals that you've been able to achieve through technology?
The easiest example of that one is the conveyor belt scenario. If you line the whole CI/CD pipeline as the conveyor belt and go, I'm going to put things in there, and the right people would be sitting at the right point, connecting everything to produce something. That is the best case scenario. Because most of the time, what happens is developer always runs for the shiny new tool. And they always, I'm not blaming the developers, but it's the leadership that makes those changes and the decisions. That becomes a problem for the conveyor belt. You go, developer wants this. We need to throw those things at it in there, and then everything will change. Everything doesn't change because your end product is the same. You change the whole working model to do something else. That will change everything. But developer is part of that conveyor belt where they produce the code, put it in there, then needs to get tested into the platform that you have. Then it needs to be tested on the network that you have, then the security measures you have before it goes onto production. Most of the time, everyone goes, it's all the developer things. They will put up securities and everything. But if your security team are not putting through the test case scenario in there, it will have issues. If your network team is not putting the performance scenarios in there and do the performance test, you will have network issues. And 80% of the cases, people go, the codes are fine, but it's not performing on the network. Let's throw more structure at it. Not. You gotta have the code run through the test because The test is constant. The network is constant. What are the things that are changing? It's the code that is changing. It's the feature that is changing in the application. What is needed to cater for that into the platform? Every time it goes a step right. Enough, DevOps is a buzzword where developer and operation comes together. But most of the
Yep.
time, people just go, it's it's the new code that is not performing here because the ops are crap. No, it's not. Ops is constant. We haven't made any changes in there, but you're changing the code and going ops is crap. Well, technically the code is coming and sitting on top of it. Without the platform, you have nothing, nowhere to run. But you're not
Hmm.
updating anything. Technically, you will see in every organization, they will go, let's make 100 changes or 100 changes into the application and invest all the money there. Then the problem happens is you have no money left for your platform and your platform struggles to support that thing. DevOps is the happy marriage between the developers and the operations. If you can't work in your happy marriage life, one or the other, you will have issues.
Yeah, that's good. We've got a couple of questions left. So, downhill run here. You'd mentioned that you'd had some huge wins around the automation and orchestration. So, we've already touched on that QAS, but you've also had some really big wins within the financial insurance sectors back in 2011 as well.
Mhm.
So, what's the common thread between these two major successes? Is there a universal lesson about maturing an organization's technology that you took away from both of these?
The ideology is if you get a complex workflow in front of you, let's say a big process work, the first thing you need to do is map out the whole end-to-end workflow, either in your head, on your paper, and see what are the unnecessary things that you're doing. Let's say, I wouldn't call it unnecessary because people will see things differently and go, oh, that's the best thing for me. Without that, I don't have any visibility. What I mean is, first rule of thumb is the handoff needs to go, even between the teams. For argument's sake, you're running a team, I'm running a team. If there's a handoff process between you and me or your team and my team,
Mhm.
we can make that seamless, that you don't have to hand off anything into a formal setting. It will automatically come to me. And then once it comes to me, I have all the necessary things that I have without asking a question. Once you get to that point where you've taken out all the hands off, then you see what are the repeat tasks. And if you're repeating the same thing, let's say for argument's sake, I used to go with 5. I have seen people go with 3. You just have that number. If you're repeating yourself, let's say 3 times or 5 times, you take and have another look at it going, can you do anything about it? Can you do anything better? Let's say you're generating a report in Excel spreadsheet. Is there a way to actually get that report into a dashboard for argument's sake?
Yep.
Because that takes away your Excel spreadsheet time that you spend. And then you start slowly dissecting it towards the path of automation. Automation path doesn't come, I should have best put this, right into your hand with a silver spoon. You pretty much have to cook the damn thing and have the spoon in your hand, go, oh, now I'm going to test it. And
Yeah.
in that test, you will always find issues. Those are the teething issues that I'll always go for is even in that 3-month trial when we're going through the database automation in the insurance company and stuff like that, and all the other automation side of it, we found issues. We even found issues like the API, or back in the days, it used to be like script running through the scenarios and not actually have done the job. And it's like, okay, I've run the script, didn't do it. All right, let's go back to the drawing board where it failed. And that sort of iterative deployment changes and looping back yourself to have it in the perfection scenario, that is important.
Yeah.
So once you
Yeah.
have that, then your automation journey starts. Then you start slowly maturing yourself. It's like, in a very simple manner, you can't eat the elephant in one day, one bite.
Mhm.
It has to
Yeah.
be a small chunk, small bite. Then you progress slowly. It takes time. It takes effort. But that extra effort is the difference maker between living your life in the same box or making the box open up and jumping into a different part.
It's really good. And just going back on one of the things you said, you'd said that there's always that magic number between 3 to 5 times. It's so funny for me. It's typically 3 I start to really question. 5 is where I'm, yeah, no, we need to do something about that. For senior IT professionals and aspiring leaders who are listening right now, who really want to take what you've said here and apply this knowledge, what is the one or maybe 2 really tangible things that when they wake up the first thing tomorrow that they can really start doing? What's your piece of advice through to them? As I said, one or two.
Go with one advice. It actually helped me change everything in my head. When we finish a day, let's say we have a very busy day or a very bad day or a very good day, we just go home and get on with our life. The thing that I would like to give everyone an advice, on your way back home or when you finish work, take 5 minutes for you and just think back, run the day back into your head. Is there anything in that entire day you can do better?
Yeah.
And that will change your life, everyone else's life, in your surroundings. And it will go into a different direction, different tangent, and you'll mature yourself before you actually know it. Because that tiny piece of thought process will trigger you inside of you going, I can do this better. I can do this differently. That's the difference maker. That's how you grow. That's how you mature. That's how you learn new experience, explore new things, and do different things.
Yeah, that's perfect. Honest self-reflection is something that is so incredibly powerful. Absolutely love that. Awesome. T, this has been an incredible deep dive. A couple of the notes or a couple of the key takeaways that I've got here is diagnose the disease and not just the symptoms. So the real win wasn't necessarily about just cutting the costs, that it was the fundamental business and architectural problems that you've actually been able to do. The next one was being an architect for simplicity and not the change. So really being able to get those successful blueprints and prioritizing the simple and the dynamic designs around them and not necessarily laying down rigid plans. And that really helps prevent those overheads. And then within the architectural side of it, from the process perspective, we put a lot of focus there of what you've said around the building and the testing and the deploying. We've mentioned so many times that just how incredibly valuable that actually is, how important that actually is. And then lastly, that the best technology decisions that are being made, the choices should be driven by the business needs and the business values and not just the hype cycle that that tool is currently on. So this has been absolutely incredibly insightful. And I do thank you so much for all of your time that you've spent with me today and for everyone listening. I'm sure lots of people did get a lot of value out of this. Now, for our audience members who are out there who want to connect with you, going over to your LinkedIn profile, is that the best way if they want to hear more?
Yep, feel free.
Awesome.
All good.
All right. T, thank you again for sharing some of your insights. You've had an extensive career, so thank you for giving us just a little bit of the slither of the pie today.
Awesome.
If you found this valuable, please share this with your colleagues. For now, keep learning, keep evolving, and lead with impact.